the stomach, it's just not used to all of that, the ways that we can abuse and weaken our digestive organs, overeating, constant snacking, diluting digestive secretions with liquids. Now, one thing that I do with my family, and we have done for a lot of years, is to not drink liquids with our meal. It really should be 15 minutes to a half an hour before you eat. And you should wait about a half an hour after you eat. So that's, by adding fluids into the stomach while you are eating, what ends up happening is you dilute those enzymes. And it does make it harder for you to digest the food that you've consumed. So that is something that you might want to the other thing is a lot of times, eating too fast, not digesting the food, chewing that up good enough, eating a lot of those are things that undue stress on the digestive organs, and indigestion can almost always end up developing. So when people eat too fast or eat too much, don't chew properly, experiencing emotional stress, they're more likely to feel, have a problem and develop indigestion to some degree. These factors can all affect the secretion of the hydrochloric acid and the digestive enzymes that are in the small intestines. Also, as people age, their hydrochloric acid levels decrease. And that begins really between about age 35 to 45. And then low hydrochloric acid levels are found in almost everyone that's over age 55. So, without enzymes, the body functions really would be so slow to sustain life. Okay. So we've got a lot of background noise going on here, and I hope that you're not having to hear all of that right now at the moment. It's been a little distracting to me. So enzymes. I want to talk about enzymes. Without enzymes, without the body producing them and not being able to pull nutrients out of the food, we wouldn't survive. The other thing is steaming vegetables lightly still retains some of the enzyme properties. Anything that is highly cooked or baked, in a high heat oven, a lot of times will destroy the enzymes. A lot of the nutrients can still be there, but that enzyme cofactor activity is destroyed in the process of processing. Raw is best, and lightly steamed is a way to maintain some of those enzymes. Okay, another thing I want to talk about here, and we don't, but our taste buds are on our tongue. And there's a lot in Ayurvedic and in Chinese medicine about the condition of the tongue. So I wanted to touch on that. I had mentioned it last week. And our medical arena of doctors don't put any thought process really into the tongue. They don't look at it as a method of diagnosis at all. And in natural healing and in other therapies of healing, historically with other areas of the world, the Ayurvedic and Chinese. The Tibetan masters, they would stick their tongue out at each other. We don't do that in the United States. It's not nice to stick your tongue out. You greet somebody and you immediately stick your tongue out at them. But what they did was, this is a way of being able to tell what kind of health you're in, is the condition of your tongue. So that would be, that was a way that they would greet each other, and actually they still do. So, this is, an East Indian and Chinese medicine that recognizes this. And, the bodies, there's body meridians that are connected to the tongue, just as they're connected to the feet and the hands and the ears. Because of the proximity, digestive disorders are particularly obvious from a tongue analysis. So you're able to tell if somebody has problems with their stomach just by looking at their tongue. And the tongue will clearly indicate indicates the body's internal digestive enzymes, assimilation, inflammation, or if there's stagnation, if there's sluggishness of that digestive tract, and if you're hydrated or dehydrated. So in Ayurvedic medicine, the tongue is a map of the internal health. Ayurvedic practitioners have used tongue diagnosis for, centuries. Any abnormalities on the tongue, they can be read by an Ayurvedically trained doctors that are very aware of this type of analysis. So the tongue can be a barometer of internal health, and the uses of abnormalities to diagnose the conditions. So, we hear about, brush your teeth, brush your tongue. And you don't want to brush your tongue with your regular toothbrush. The bristles can be, just a bit too intense and actually, scratch the tongue. They do make these little round, flat, very, very short bristles on it. And that's really good to get as far back to your throat as you can. And to pull that forward and get all of that off of your tongue. Chinese medicine has used tongue analysis for over 5,000 years. It's amazing how we think we're so ahead, and there is just so much more proven stuff elsewhere. And the tongue, if the tongue is real coated in the morning, it can be indicative of bad bowel bacteria. It could indicate overgrowth of candida. It also lets you know that the liver is not digesting fats very well. So if you've got a tongue that's real coated in the morning, people tend to have a tendency of bloating and feeling physically and mentally tired. So a coated tongue is, an indicator of problems when you're dealing with the digestive tract. So it's sectioned off into 3 areas, the tongue. And along the sides of the tongue is the liver gallbladder area of the tongue. So, if the tongue is real red, or if it's real tender, or if it seems a little swollen, it can be indicative of something that is going on in that liver gallbladder area. The front of the tongue has a lot to do with the lungs. The very tip of the tongue is the heart when they're looking at the tongue. So, when they have you stick your tongue out, they can tell if the tongue is thin, or if it's too thick, or if it's red, or if it has spots on it. Ridges around the, like teeth imprints, is a sign of dehydration. So if somebody sticks their tongue out, or you take a look at tell your kids to stick their tongue out and take a look at their tongue, if they have the teeth imprints along the outer edge of the tongue, getting enough water. So if the tongue is flat, if it looks too thin, if it has a lot of crevices in it, like a geographic tongue is what they call that. That has a lot to do with specific health problems. If the tongue is, if they stick it out and it's pointed, that shows a lot of internal tension. And the tongue, if it's real, limp and it's flat and it's real rounded at the edge, that's somebody that just they're pretty laid back. They don't really do a whole lot. It's a reflection that the internal organs, our digestive organs, are pretty weak. They're very weak. There's not good tone. Ironically, in Ayurvedic medicine, they have where they talk about a forked tongue, and if it's a forked tongue, where when they stick it out, it seems to have that center tendon seems to retract it a little bit. That there's just a little lump on each side of that center tendon, where there's just a very slight lump there on each side of that. And so they call that a forked tongue. And what's associated with a forked tongue is indecisiveness or rapidly changeable moods. It immediately made me think of the Native American Indians who would talk about the white man who spoke with the forked tongue. And look at where that all went, with how the Native American Indians really couldn't believe anything they were being told, and so they talked about man who spoke with forked tongue. So it's ironic that for 5,000 years, China has recognized this as someone who has an indecisive personality, or somebody who maybe from a mental standpoint, their moods change all the time. So that was kind of ironic. If the tongue is real stiff, that's mental and physical tension within the body. The movement of the tongue. So if it's lightly trembling. So if someone sticks the tongue out and they can't keep the tongue still and it trembles, that's a debilitated nervous system. If the tongue is real rigid, that's high mental and physical stress. So there's, the wide tip, if it's thin, if it's thick, if it's, different colors, it can be bright red, it can be pink, it can be white, brown and black spots. The very back part of the throat, the very back part of the tongue, at the back of the throat, so the back part of the tongue, is where the kidneys, bladder, and the intestinal tract is picked up. So if you've got a lot of little lumps back there and swelling and different kind of colors back there, that can be interpreted as some specific things that are going on with the kidneys, bladder, and the intestines. The center of the tongue has to do with the spleen and the stomach. So the very front of the tongue again is the heart. Right after that is the lungs. The sides of the tongue is liver and gallbladder. That center area is the spleen and the stomach. And then the very back part of the tongue is the kidneys, bladder, and intestines. So you're able to tell through tongue diagnosis there's a couple websites that you could write